have a look at how these interact. And I have done a live here before talking about guilt, so there's a little overlap, although there's lots of different things too. And guilt, and what I really wanted to do is to have a look on how hanging on to certain states or messages which are rooted in the past can result in stuckness. They can result actually in sickness, and hold us back in our mental health, even our physical health sometimes. So we'll take a little look at the mantle of guilt, and we'll have a little look at the concept of growth, and then put these together into creating some ideas, some being mindfully in touch with what you consider your glorious life, what would make a glorious next chapter for you, and what might you be able to express and ask for as you navigate this way on this path through. Okay, so knowing what you want is important, but first sometimes we need to strip things away. So guilt is all about things in the past. Now growth is all about knowing what you want and being confident to go for it. And in that process, which sounds so very simple, there are a whole host of little actions and states of mind that we need to have. So we need our capacities. We need to be confident to say, I would like, to say yes, and to say no. And only when you really have that ability to be assertive and present can you do that. Growth means increasing in capacity and possibly changing direction as you move toward the light. And a glorious life, what is that about? Why, those of us who are fortunate to have roofs over our head, and ability to communicate in this way, thank you very much for that donation. Ability to communicate with each other, the ability to be mindful, to enjoy the great things of life. This is a glorious life, and it's really important, isn't it, that whatever material things we do or don't have, we feel as if we deserve or are entitled to a glorious life. And I feel that's as much at the age of 87 as it is at the age of 7, and a whole host either sides of those and in between. So however short or long your life ahead is, it's important that you allow it without chains and access the strengths which you almost certainly will have developed over your lifetime. And we'll share some little reflections and affirmations along the way today rather than just at the end, to help ourselves to move forwards freely and with self-compassion. So that's the outline of our day. So let's begin with that which we might want to shift, and we'll have a little look at that pattern of guilt which so many people seem to feel. And women are able to feel guilty about all kinds of things, Now I'm going to call this the big stuff in life and the small stuff in life. However, I do appreciate that to each and every person, what might seem small to me can seem big to you, and vice versa. So please feel free to work with this as suits you. Women can feel guilty about everything. They can feel, ranging from guilt because our children are unhappy, guilt because we're not brilliant parents, not the idealised parent we thought we were going to be. We're not the Disney family, and we might say thank goodness for that. At other times we might fill our head with unrealistic expectations. We might feel guilt at not loving our partners. We might feel guilt at being single, for not looking after our parents properly. Guilt at saying no to people when you really haven't wanted to do something. There's sometimes even guilt for taking up space. You know, when you walk into a room and you start with, oh, sorry, sorry, as if apologising for yourself before you even begin. Guilt for putting your needs first. Your needs first. Women are good at all these guilts. For eating what we want to. You know, how many women do secret eating? Doing what you want to. So many things to feel guilty about. Yes. Wow. I see the conversation on the sidebar as ever is interesting, and compassion and support moving around this group as it always does. So that is very lovely. Now, I might have told some of you this before, so you may know the story, but I will use my Auntie Gladys again as an example of guilt on what I would call the small stuff, but which to her was massive. So she lived on her own. She was 75, I think, when she died. And her house was so clean you could eat your dinner off the floor if you so choose to do that. And toward the end of her life, when she became sick, we went round to see her, and she was very anxious, and she said to me and to my husband, does the house look any different to you? And we looked around and it looked immaculate. And we said to her, no, it doesn't. We couldn't see any change. And she was quite angry, and she said, blast it, blast it. I've spent my whole life cleaning every day of my adult life. I have wiped and cleaned and vacuumed and polished only because I would feel guilty if I hadn't. And this last fortnight, I haven't been able to do it in the same way. And I felt so guilty, and you're right, it still looks the same. I'm just realising how much of my life I've wasted on a daily basis because I would have blooming well felt guilty. And it gets me thinking, how many of you have ever apologised to someone for the condition of your house when they have turned up to see you? I'm sorry the house is such a mess. I'm sorry this isn't quite perfect yet. And it's something I've never, ever, ever heard a man do that. I've only ever heard women do that. I don't know if you recognise this, or you or other women actually do this to feel the responsibility that everything must be in some perfect state, and that even with visitors to your house you can feel guilty if you haven't done certain things. And when you're on the other end of someone's guilt, even as a visitor, now this is where we can start to work with our guilt over anything, is when you're on the other end of somebody's guilt, when you are that visitor and you go to the house and somebody says, I'm sorry the house isn't tidy, does that make you feel more or less comfortable? Do you want somebody, even at this level of cleaning the house, do you want somebody to feel guilty for you because of an expectation that they think you have? Now, the experience of guilt comes from an ingrained ethic of feeling responsible, as if there's an obligation involved. And when you're on the other end of that, it's you can remember, you can learn that this is not actually empowering. So most of us don't feel, we don't intend for our family and friends to feel guilty on our behalf, do we, for anything? Do we really want the people that we care for to carry around a burden of guilt on their shoulders? So the first rule, if you like, of reframing guilt is to put yourself on the other end of your own behaviour, to imagine what it's like being the person whom you might feel guilty towards or about. It's not empowering, actually, and it's slightly superior. So just hold that in mind. And then how often do you feel, and I think this is a great thing to do to yourself, really, we're very creative, aren't we? how often do you find yourself imposing your own rules to yourself and then feeling guilty because you haven't done them? Like, this week I'm going to go to the gym 3 times. I'm going to go for a walk 5 times. This week I'm not going to eat so much chocolate. This week I won't have a glass of wine. This week I will clean that room out until I'm concentrating on domestic things. We women are far, far more than that. I use them as perhaps common examples that I come across in popular culture, in popular discourse, as if we have to sort of do these things. It's crazy to even impose rules for ourselves that we can then not do and feel guilty about. So when our rules become a should, this is a lovely alert. This is notice your shoulds. I should do this. I should really do this. I should go to the gym. I should do this piece of work. I should cook the dinner. I should always make homemade food. Where. These shoulds. Whenever you notice a should, see if you can turn it into an I could go to the gym. However, I don't want to. Or I'm tired today, or I'd rather go for a walk, or whatever it's going to be. I could make sure everybody in the world is okay in my world, or I could trust them. And I could choose, to prioritise and to go with my real guts about what I want to do and feel a real outcome about, rather than a list of shoulds that can be very tiring. And there's a comment here in the side about, kind of people doing their own thing. So true with the invisible self rules. Absolutely, Lee. And Jana, a Jewish guilt. Yeah, son to mom, you've lost so much weight. Why? Mom, I haven't eaten in 2 weeks, so why not? I didn't want any food in my mouth when you called. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And a bit sad, really. So notice your shoulds. And even, here's an experiment for a week. What about every time you find yourself doing a should, see if you can note it somewhere. Is this a should that you want? Is it connected to a well-formed outcome? So if I want to be fitter to do that walk in the summer, then I should walk twice a week. But not I should for anybody else's sake, It's if then is different. But the shoulds that seem like imposed rules really are not. So change your shoulds to coulds, note them down, change your shoulds to coulds. Work out the consequences, and as you age mindfully, and this is really important, however old any of you are, it's work towards aging as you want to rather than as you should. And that is a great thing to be able to do, as you want to rather than as you should. It is surprising how fearful we can become of a number, which isn't to say there aren't changes as we age all the way through life. There are. And nonetheless, it's, it isn't like we have to stop doing things because we hit 60. It isn't as if our whole body will suddenly collapse. There will be changes all the way through from perimenopause, menopause onwards. But change your, make sure you know what you want. Now, this thing about being responsible for the happiness of others, this is huge, and it is an impossible expectation to fulfill. It really is. It really is impossible. Feeling that you have to please others, that you have to put everybody else first, that you have to make sure that others are heard at your own expense, which is where guilt leads. And that's a big ask, and it's a risk. All the research, which is classic research that's gone on for years, and I believe still comes up with similar findings, that when women and men are in a group together, the women are so much quieter, they're much better at the empathic understanding remarks, at the links. yet they're not so heard in terms of what they actually want to say as maybe men. Taking responsibilities for our partners and our grown-up children because we feel guilty if they're not happy robs them of something. It prevents them from becoming resilient. You know, we cannot be resilient if we haven't had a trial or a disappointment or something to bounce back from, because that's what resilient is. And when we over coddle our children, our adult children particularly, when we run after them because they've forgotten something rather than let them learn the consequence of having forgotten something, we always make it easy, and it's it just stops them from developing skills. Now then, Harpreet's got a lovely comment here. I don't impose any shoulds on myself, but my family won't stop imposing those shoulds on me. Lee, even for my toddlers, now this is interesting, isn't it? Taking responsibility for our children, of course, it's slightly different. And again, there are levels at which we do it. Do we stop them ever learning? You know, do we help them to be responsible appropriately to their age group as we go through? Or do we just stop them learning any responsibility at all? It's interesting, and it's not always easy to have straight answers. And when we take responsibility for others, that's a very different position from taking care and compassion. So I'm not saying don't care, far from it. I'm saying care from an equal basis. Because if we constantly bail other people out, we almost saying that, you know, I'm superior, I can deal with this, but you can't. You know, you can't deal with this, but I can. In some way, I've got some magic ability that you don't have. And although it may be well-intentioned, it is a superior position. And it's draining. It's out of kilter with ourselves. So when you can see guilty behaviours as not the wonderful kind thing that they're set up to be, it can make it easier to give up some guilt. It can help you to feel freer, to have emotional freedom, letting go of the burden of guilt, of letting other people have responsibility as a gift to all concerned, to not only yourself but to them. And I understand that as we reflect on lives and actions, sometimes we have a bit of genuine adult regret, and that's a different question. It's a rare person who would do nothing differently now when we look back on our whole lives. But we can learn from our occurrences, and when we really did mess up, if we have, I certainly have on occasion, if we've hurt somebody or realise we've made a decision that's not helpful and regret it, let's acknowledge this, express the regret by all means, and also know that you are doing your best from the resources you have available to you at the time. I have different resources now than I did when I was 24. You know, I can do things differently now that I couldn't do differently then. So let's look after ourselves with compassion. Self-forgiveness, self-compassion. And one of the reasons that we claim wisdom, or, you know, those of us who claim to have some wisdom in our older age, is because we know that it's a quality that increases over time and with experience. So there are likely some things we do differently. So let's also be wise enough to understand that it is best to be non-judgmental of ourselves, assess the behaviour, resolve not to do it again, but be non-judgmental of ourselves. You know, extend this value to yourself. I'm sure you give it to other people in your life, extend it to you. I know there's times in my life I could have done better or differently. How do you practice self-forgiveness, Catherine? Well, I think in those ways it's like acknowledging the decisions I have made, knowing that they could have been better, but really, you know, standing right outside myself as well as the other people involved in a situation and looking down on myself as perhaps a bit smaller, perhaps somebody caught up in a context of decision making and history where you've acted in ways that are not the most fruitful. Allow yourself to be human. Allow other people in a situation to have some responsibility. So practice self-forgiveness in the same way as you would practice forgiveness to anybody else. Look at your behaviour in a context. Know that you've learned from it. Know that your intent might have been the best it could be. That's all I can say, Catherine, in this particular situation. Do come into the workshop if you want to do more with that, or into the classroom to put comments. So, anyway, I gave up on guilt, and Catherine, this might be helpful. Just realising that it was something that I did to myself in my head. So, yes, I am responsible for some actions in my life that are better or worse than others. I will claim the good ones and the best ones, and I will learn from them and keep doing more of them. The ones that were not so good, the ones that were even quite hurtful to people, even though that might or might not have been my intention, were things that I would never do again, because hurting others hurt me. We can learn, we can take wisdom. So, realising that I did guilt to myself, I quite intentionally decided not to do guilt, because to do guilt you have to rerun things over and over in particular ways, and you can rerun them, as I said, from a distance if you're outside looking in, and give yourself a bit more forgiveness. And I actually told people in my family, no, I don't do guilt. I don't do guilt anymore. Yes, I don't do guilt. I don't do guilt to myself. I regret, that's different. I regret one or two things that I didn't have the resources to do differently. I don't do guilt. So I pay more attention to remembering magical times and to the times that are now and yet to come. So let's just take a pause a minute. Just take a pause, a breath. Go into your breath. Reflect. And I'm just going to share 3 statements, and if you want to, you can say them out loud or in your head with me. I'll say them each twice, and this is just about the experience of guilt. So when I take responsibility for others, I rob them of responsibility for themselves. When I take responsibility for others, I rob them of responsibility for themselves. I do the best I can at the time. I do the best I can at the time. My life is unique, and I am responsible for my well-being and to treat others as equal. My life is unique, and I am responsible for my well-being and to treat others as equal. So Fiona, thank you for your comment. So when we leave guilt, we can then move on to growth. What does growth mean? Last summer, I sat outside my house, and Portugal gets very hot in the summer, and I had some basil growing outside in a pot, and I hadn't watered it for a couple of days. I'd forgotten, and it sat and drooped in front of my very eyes. So I went outside to have a drink, a tea, whatever it was I was drinking, and I poured water into the basil. It was early in the morning, so not too hot. And in the half an hour that I sat outside having my drink with a friend, we watched the basil grow. You know, you can see a plant when it's growing. You can see what happens if it is dried up, and you can see how quickly and how amazingly, when you water it, the change is almost immediate. The leaves plump up, and you can almost see it getting taller as it stops drooping. I believe that growth, our personal growth, is about feeding ourselves, watering ourselves, building new shoots and branches. That's what growth is. It's expansion in some way, and not just around our middles, but expansion in some way. It's about building new shoots and branches to our lives. And they don't have to be huge, they can be little. They can be huge, or they can be little. It's about doing what we need to head toward the light, and that is the physical light of the atmosphere in which we live. And if we're pot bound, then we need to replant ourselves. We need to give ourselves a shake, put some fresh soil around us, and give ourselves more room to move in. We need to breathe fully if we want to grow. There are certain conditions for growth. So we let out that which holds us back, the unresourceful thoughts and states, and then growth is about letting in the changes, about continuing to be open, continue to be curious. Each day that comes, we've never seen it before. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. And that gives us cause to be grateful when our day is good, because we don't know what's going to happen. And it allows us to be curious and to not think that we know everything, but that we can see things in different ways. It's about learning. It's about being prepared to learn still. Let's learn from people. I learn from younger people. I learn different things. I learn how culture's developing, whether I like it or not. Let's learn about it so that we know. Let's accept some new directions. And we all are, in a way, aren't we? Who knew that everybody, who knew 30 years ago that we'd all be communicating through this means, and we've taken the time and trouble to learn different technologies. And then here comes the assertive presence bit, really, to make sure that we ask for what we want. My basil plant was asking me for water. It was showing me by the droop of its leaves, demonstrating that it didn't have enough to grow. So you need to wave, ask for what you want, to be proactive about getting it. And sometimes to step outside our comfort zone. That can be useful, can't it, sometimes? You've done it before, you can do it again. I can't believe there's anybody listening who has not at some time stepped outside your comfort zone. So, if you've done it before, you can do it again. And then think about, really think about what you want. What's really important to you. Think a few months ahead, a year ahead, 5 years ahead. Where do you want to be? There's no point waiting to start anything for any longer than now, in some small way at least. So both of these things then so far that we've looked at, letting go of guilt and feeling free to move on with growth, require an assertive presence. And that means being able to say no without any guilt, and being able to say yes to what attracts you. So again, I'm going to give 3 statements to share, which you can use as affirmations, which you can join in with me if you would like to. So go into your breath, into your body, give yourself a shake if you want to, and I'm going to say each statement twice. I am the mistress of my one life, and I can ask for what I want. I am the mistress of my one life, and I can ask for what I want. I can accept, seek and develop opportunities that come my way. I can accept, seek and develop opportunities that come my way. I can say no to that which I don't want. I can say no to that which I don't want. And to bring this all together before I close, let's go to what is the glorious life. And as any of you who have done any of my courses or meditations know, I do believe that the gift of life itself is glorious, and I frame aging as a privilege not granted to everyone. There will be ups and downs along the way. I'm not someone who thinks you can sail through life without any difficulty, any challenges. But there is a truth that if we use our wisdom to choose our responses and to allow ourselves and accept ourselves when we feel less than wonderful as well, but that's just as in any other part of life. We can have hurdles and challenges a lot earlier than our postmenopausal times. So it is, I believe, up to you. It's up to you to pay attention to the life that you want with intention. You know, pay attention. Now. And if you're in situations that are not fully happy, you know, think about the areas that you can control. Think about what you might like a little bit more of or a little bit less of, even if you feel you can't have everything of what you'd ideally like. You know, people who are in relationships where they're concerned about leaving, it would be too big a thing to do. Well, think about the outcomes. Why would you want to leave? It would be to have more freedom, to have more safety, whatever it's going to be. And if you can't get the whole thing, go for a little bit of it. How can I have a bit more freedom in my everyday? But whatever it is for you, whether it's big or small, pay attention to it. Pay attention to your living. And I'm going to give you 3 affirmations to end on in a minute. I'd like to re-invite you to the workshops that are happening in the next couple of weeks. You can find them on my profile. You can find them under the Learn button on the Insight Timer app. And bear in mind that there are now some flexible payment options if it feels too expensive for you. There is the possibility of, you know, paying over time, and there is the possibility of a discount. So please don't let finance hold you back if you would like to come and work in a small group interactively to explore any more of these issues. Experiences with each other, no one talks about them. Yeah, okay, a live workshop about what happens to our bodies as we age. Women share their experiences with each other. No one tells us these things. Yes, well, Jana, that would be a great, that would be a great one to bring to a workshop. Or perhaps in my next live in this time zone next week, it will be health. My H is for health, with hope, health and hope. So come to the workshop if you'd like to. Go onto my profile. Do enjoy the programs that are on there, both the audios and the full programs. And thank you to those who've made donations to me today. They are so much appreciated. They are actually necessary to keep these going. So thank you as well for engaging and being here. So to finish, let's complete these sentences together. You'll complete them for yourself because we might all have different answers. And it's just something to think about. To make my life more glorious this year, I would like. to make my life more glorious this year, I would like. I would like to stop doing put that slightly differently. What I want to stop doing is. This year I will say yes to this year I will say yes to and this year I will say no to. This year I will say no to. Okay, thank you all very much indeed, Juliana. Thank you, Juliana, you're very welcome, and thank you for your comments. Hi Nancy, thank you for your comment. Do come into the circle if you're not in already. It's Dr. Jan's circle for the women, and that will, just kind of keep an eye on what's happening. We don't have huge discussions in there. We have some comments, but it's a source of information. So feel free to come in there. If you'd like to come to a workshop, then do. I will put the next live up this evening so that it's available for you to get the link. So keep on looking. Take very good care of yourselves. Very good care of yourselves. Because wherever you go, there you will be. So I appreciate your presence, each and every one. See